difficult circumstances to improve the preparations and conduct of elections in Nigeria, which compared to other electoral environments, is no doubt very, very challenging. And I say this because, for example, I know for a fact from what I read in the newspapers and what I get to know is happening in INEC, that not only have they retained important aspects of what INEC under my leadership did in terms of reforms to reposition INEC to be the best election management body in Africa, because that was our goal at that time. So many of the reform measures we have introduced, they have actually not only retained them, but they have also worked very hard to improve upon them. And for example, as you are no doubt aware, they have retained the use of technology. They have even gone beyond what we have done in terms of introducing the beavers. And I can say that from what I know about the beavers, it's a remarkable technological improvement over the card reader, which was used in my time. And I also am very pleased that they have now got the legal framework and they are prepared to use electronic transmission of results, which will certainly not only reduce the avenues that fraudulent activities are perpetrated in the transmission of results manually, but also will improve the efficiency and reduce the time that it takes to make announcements of the results. Of course, use of technology in these modern times requires adequate preparation in terms of cyber security to avoid hacking, to avoid illegal interference, and it also requires adequate internet availability. From what I have read and heard people in INEC say, these challenges have been looked into, and in their preparations, they have taken decisions and actions which will provide sufficient cyber security, as well as reduce the possibility of network or internet interruptions in the transmission of results. And I truly hope that this is the case. And if it is the case, then obviously we are set to have substantively more efficiently generated transmission of our results. Now, I must say also that comparing what I now know that INEC under Yakub Mahmoud have done compared to what we did, I think I can say that there has been remarkable improvement in the relationship between the election management body and the critical stakeholders. For example, they are lucky to have a new electoral legal framework which provides very important provisions which will improve the integrity of the electoral process. But in addition to that, they have sustained the relationships that we started with civil society organizations and have even improved upon this. They have retained, for example, the relationship that we established, particularly the coordination of the role of all security organizations in the conduct of elections through what we call ICSES, and they have sustained excess, and they have improved upon it, and they have even brought additional participants in excess. For example, I understand that they have now brought the anti-corruption agencies into excess so that there is broader coordination. And I think this is really commendable. I can also mention that I know for a fact that they have improved training of INEC staff and therefore enhanced their professionalism in terms of electoral administration. And in general, therefore, to answer your question, personally, from what I know, I can say that INEC seems prepared to conduct the 2023 elections and to make them much, much better than the 2019 elections. And of course, like all Nigerians, I have concerns because our hope and prayer is that it will come to pass that the 2023 elections will deepen democracy and give us, or rather ensure that Nigerian people have free and fair opportunities to choose or to elect candidates of their choice. But of course, like every other Nigerian, I also have concerns, you know. So I keep hoping and praying that everything works out well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to push you a bit further, and I'm going to ask you to express some of those concerns or the areas you think INEC should look out for that may affect the free and fair conduct of these elections. That's point number one. And then point number two, from the body language of the president and the presidency, what is your opinion as to his thoughts as to whether the elections should really be credible or if he has a favored candidate, in spite of the fact that his party is contesting?
Well, let me start by indicating what I consider to be my concerns. I think the first concern I have is that while one can say, or as I have said, that INEC seems to have made remarkable improvements with regards to its preparation for the conduct of the elections, one can hardly say that the political parties and the candidates have recorded any remarkable improvement in their disposition in their engagement with the electoral process. One of my biggest concerns is that our political class, those who run the parties, as well as those who, particularly the so-called major parties, and also those who contest elections, seems to engage in the electoral process with virtually the same kind of mindset that they had engaged in the electoral process since 1999. Hardly can one point to any significant change in their disposition. And that disposition, I regret to say, is a mindset of winning elections by hook or by crook. As the President Obasanjo at that time said before the 2007 elections, that engagement in the election is a do or die affair. I must say that even contemporarily, all political parties, candidates and the parties, particularly the so-called major parties, seem to have that disposition. So that's a major concern for me, because no matter how good the electoral legal framework is, and no matter how competent and professional and impartial INEC conducts the election, if the politicians, the candidates and parties go into election with that kind of mindset and disposition, then obviously we are unlikely to make significant progress in terms of having free, fair, credible elections, or even in terms of availing the electorate the opportunity to be able to make free choices and to choose to elect people of their choice. So that's my major concern. Of course, related to this is the concern that the role of money, the use of money by these parties and political class has only increased over time. Yes, in the current legal electoral framework, the Electoral Act 2022, there are provisions and the penalties which seek to minimize, if not totally eliminate, the use of money in politics. But it's still a major concern. It appears that the candidates are not too much worried about that, although the recent change in the color of some of the currencies and the restrictions imposed by the CBN may somehow impact on the use of money. But clearly, use of money in politics is a major concern for me, and I believe for many other Nigerians. And I also think that an issue of major concern is that we are going into the 2023 elections with relatively poor choices of candidates among the so-called major parties. Because the media keeps talking about these major parties, hardly covers the smaller parties, you know, and to my mind, that frankly, the choice offered to Nigerians, it's not impressive at all. So these are my concerns, and my only hope is that in the next 30 days before the first in the 2 rounds of elections, critical stakeholders such as the civil society, the media, and the others would begin to focus attention in terms of how effectively pressure can be put to minimize the use of money and to see some improvement in the disposition of our candidates and political parties. Now, with regards to your question regarding President Muhammad Buhari, well, I may not be a good reader of the body language, but from what he said and what he continues to repeat, he says that he wants to ensure that the 2023 elections are conducted freely and fairly so that citizens can choose the best candidate. But we also know, of course, that as a member of the APC, his party has a candidate, and he has also been involved in going around the country campaigning for that candidate. And so what is clear is that while he says and maybe means what he says about the need to have free, fair elections and to ensure that citizens have free choice, but clearly his party has a candidate and has been promoting this candidate. And of course, the major concern is when an incumbent party is contesting elections, there are concerns about how state resources may be used in one way or the other to the advantage of the candidate of the ruling party. So to what extent has President Buhari been able to control this in order to ensure that indeed Nigerians have free, fair opportunities to choose candidates of, to elect candidates of their choice, it remains to be seen. Thank you. Hello? Can you hear me? Are you hearing me?
Thank you. Subject of and your views towards the 2023 elections. I know that at some stage you were a member of a political party or the other. I don't know if you are still a member of that party. I know that some people try to drag you into running for office in one position or the other. And from where you stand, what are your thoughts and your views towards the 2023 elections? Some people are even saying that the elections might not hold or something like that or the other one, and so on and so forth. So,
first of all, I truly hope and pray that the elections hold, because I cannot imagine the consequences of these elections not holding in terms of the future of our country, Nigeria. So my hope and prayer is that we all need, as stakeholders in the Nigerian project, we all need to have an enlightened self-interest, which means to think beyond our noses and to think for the future, not only for ourselves, but for the generations behind us, to make sure that these elections are held, and to ensure that not only are they held, but are held in such a manner that the elections will have integrity. No election everywhere in this world is perfect, but if it has integrity and it is transparent, and the majority of the citizens will agree that the results declared approximate the choices of the people, then obviously that is a positive gain, and we can then look towards the future for incremental positive gains and value additions. But frankly, we should not even be thinking or contemplating about the elections not holding. INEC says it is ready to conduct this election. It says that it is prepared to conduct this election. And the security agencies have said they are prepared to support INEC to conduct the election. And all this taken together with the president's expressed statements about ensuring that the elections hold, I believe are things that we should hold them to, and actually also work towards ensuring that the elections actually hold. I think, let me be a bit clearer. There is no doubt that in many areas in this country, there are security challenges. So I think it will be unrealistic to expect that on the 5th of February, or in the election coming later in March, that in all polling units, in all wards, in all local governments, in all states, the elections will take place. No doubt, in some places, the level of insecurity is such that our security agencies may not be able to give 100% coverage, and therefore to ensure that all the elections take place in all the polling units. But I am hopeful that it is possible to conduct elections in many of the states where there is this insecurity, particularly given the recent gains made by the security agencies, particularly areas covered by banditry and the Boko Haram, whether it is in the northeast or in the northwest, even though there may be a few enclaves where the elections may not hold. And therefore, my own thinking is that the few places where elections could not hold are will not be statistically significant to in any serious manner affect the results of the elections, particularly the presidential elections. So this is what I have to say regarding this question.
Okay, so what other thoughts do you have from where you stand? Which party do you think will win the elections?
Okay, thank you very much. I forgot you also asked whether I'm still a member of any political party. Certainly, I joined in 2020, at least 5 good years after I left INEC, because I didn't want to be politically involved, for people to conflate my former role as INEC chairman with involvement in a political party. But 5 years after I left INEC, I decided to exercise my citizenship right, my fundamental right to join a political party. But I have also decided not to go the whole hog in terms of contesting for elections, in spite of what you said, the inducements and the offers and the attractions to compete or to participate in elections. So I have joined the People's Redemption Party, and I have been very, very active in terms of providing support, participating in their enlightenment programs and campaigns, and in terms of creating networks and bringing people of like minds for us to be able to build the party into a party of the future. No doubt we are fielding candidates in all constituency elections throughout the country. The media considers us, among with others, as a small party, you know, but there are definitely areas where we are very strong and where we feel sufficiently confident that we may be able to win our elections. And we do have a very, very, I don't want to turn your platform into a campaign platform, but I also believe that if all the candidates are put on the table without this distinction of major parties and smaller parties, our candidate is a very strong potential candidate with many positive aspects that are better and more favorable for Nigeria than some of the things that we see with the so-called leaders or candidates of the major parties. So I am active in partisan politics, not as a candidate, but I belong to a political party, exercising my right as a Nigerian to do so.
May I ask, Prof, why you chose not to run for office? And despite the fact that you've been so active in political parties, and then there were attempts that I know, especially spearheaded by Bugaje Usman and Professor Patutomi, to put together this big tent coalition of the so-called small parties. I don't know what happened to that and why you think that didn't quite succeed the way it was thought and intended. And then finally, you didn't answer my question as to who do you think will win the elections?
On your last question, I will beg to reserve the right not to predict who is likely to win the election. I'm a political scientist. I can make predictions, but because I'm active in partisan politics, no matter how objective or rational or good my prediction is, most Nigerians are likely to interpret it in a partisan manner. So I will keep my own projections to myself and only hope and pray that Nigerians as voters will use a good criteria to make a good choice of any of the candidates on offer that they believe can do well for our country, Nigeria. And to be honest, again, I used my right to decide that although I was convinced, both from my experience in INEC and my experience of studying Nigerian politics, that nobody as a citizen, particularly enlightened citizen, can afford not to be involved in Nigerian politics, given the nature and character of contemporary Nigerian politics. It appears that good people, experienced people, people with integrity, and people who can really add value to our politics have chosen to either sit on the fence or to keep away from politics under this perception that Nigerian politics is so dirty and nobody wants to soil his or her hand. But by doing so, it looks like the most likely people to add value to improving the nature, context, and character of Nigerian politics are staying away from politics, either as participants or even as contestants, and if that continues, what will happen is that those who have already captured the political process, who are already using it for their own selfish and self-serving interests, and who are mobilizing religion, ethnicity, regionalism, and all kinds of primordial identities to divide people and to continue to hold sway in politics, will continue to do so. So that's why I took the decision that, look, I want to now join politics and contribute in my own way. And there are many ways one can contribute to a political party, even without contesting for elections. So for now, I decided to limit myself to participating, helping with ideas, with write-ups, with enlightenment campaigns, with networks, and so on and so forth. But to answer your other question, yes, I was one of those, together with Bugaje and Pat Otomi and many other patriotic Nigerians, who believed that, first of all, those parties that have been dominant in our politics since 2023 in governance, either at the federal or the state level, have messed up our country sufficiently to make people who want positive changes to get together, to organize, and to ensure that 2023 elections are used as an opportunity to bring this positive change. So we devoted a lot of time and the energy in building that big tent, in ensuring that we build a sufficiently cohesive coalition to be able to be impactful in the 2023 general elections. So regrettably, for a number of reasons, we were unable to pull it through. And of course, there are so many variables. I can just mention a few. I think one of the reasons was that we probably started very late in the context of the timetable for the 2023 general elections. Because if we were to have one tent where everybody would contest, it's like doing mergers and having a party that everybody will join and contest on. And frankly, that was not possible given the timetable that we had. But then we discussed also electoral alliances, and which really would have been very, very positive and useful. But I must say that I think some of us were also in a hurry to be visible and to contest elections in the 2023 general elections. And unfortunately, either that self-serving objective or what you can call hurriedness, if you want to be diplomatic, truncated having our enlightened self-interest to think for the future rather than for now. But I have not given up hope in terms of having a credible alternative political platform that can really be a progressive alternative to the so-called major parties. And hopefully, maybe people will become sane enough after the 2023 general elections for us to begin that process early and hopefully make it impactful before the next cycle of the general elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll now hand over to Jumoke or Sonny to say a few words and then take some questions from the general public. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, Prof, you're welcome. All right, my name is Sonny. Thanks. It is a well-known fact that just like you alluded to, politicians, if they don't play by the rules, we are not likely to have a credible election. In your experience, and I know that some INEC officers have been caught compromised in the process in the past. Now, so the questions is, I have two questions. Have there been any prosecution of those INEC officials that have compromised themselves with politicians in the past when you were INEC chairman? And what do you think can be done to make sure that this doesn't happen? Because there will always be people willing to collude with the politicians in the process.
All right. Thank you very much. Can I answer the question or take more?
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sonny, for that question. No doubt, Nigerian elections are characterized by impunity, both by election officials and the politicians. And the best way to deal with impunity is to have effective laws that can address them and to ensure that, particularly in terms of fraudulent activities, they are prosecuted. Unfortunately, our electoral legal framework has given a lot of responsibilities to INEC. And it's, one can say, even overloaded INEC with many responsibilities, such that it cannot do all of them effectively and efficiently. And a prosecution of electoral offenders by the Electoral Act, even this new Electoral Act, still leaves it with INEC. And the INEC cannot successfully do all of the responsibilities given to it. For example, INEC is expected to prepare and conduct elections. It is expected to register political parties. It is expected to prosecute electoral offenders. It is expected to delimit constituencies and so on and so forth. And that is why the Muhammad Lawal Uwais Electoral Reform Commission of 2008, actually 2007, 2008, actually recommended what they call unbundling of INEC, so that a lot of these other responsibilities can be taken away and the INEC can focus on preparation and conduct of elections. And prosecuting electoral offenders is one of those things that INEC has not done very successfully. And I can tell you with all modesty, it is only our commission that began prosecution. Before we came into INEC in 2010, there was no record of prosecution of any electoral offender between 1999 to 2010. So we commenced prosecution of electoral offenders right after the January 2011 registration of voters, because we were able to compile a record of people who had done multiple registrations. And since it was an electronically based multiple registration, it's very, very easy to prove. I mean, somebody would have gone to this polling unit at this particular point and registered, and there is an electronic trail, and there is a photograph, maybe wearing a red shirt, if it's a lady wearing a blue headscarf, and then later in the day or later in the week, they go to another polling unit and register. So we have all those records. And from those records, we were able to compile, after the 2011 registration, a record of 870,000 multiple registrations, and these are criminal offenses and could be prosecuted. I can tell you that INEC was only able, and that is why I'm saying at least we started it, we were only able to prosecute no more than 30 who have done this. Why? Because INEC has a very small unit, legal unit. Secondly, there are, even though INEC is to prosecute, it has to rely on the police for the first information report, which is used to prosecute. It also has to get the policemen who are at the polling unit or the presiding officers, NYSC, who are at the polling unit, who may have gone back to their places of original posting, and it's very, very difficult to get them back together. And at any one time, that small legal unit of INEC is preoccupied with either pre-election matters in court or post-election tribunal work or appeals. You know, so it's totally unrealistic for Nigerians to expect substantive prosecution of electoral offenders that can address the matter of impunity in the Nigerian electoral process. So yes, INEC has been making efforts since my time to prosecute electoral offenders, even after the 2019 general elections. A professor was prosecuted, you know, and jailed because he compromised, you know. So where INEC is able to gather the evidence and to be able to get cooperation from the police, to have the reports and to get the witnesses, INEC was able to do prosecution. But the prosecution that INEC makes, given what I have said about the lack of capacity within INEC to do this competently and efficiently, frankly, means that INEC can only do very little, even with the best of intention. And that is why I am still a strong believer of the need to establish an electoral offenses commission. And I don't know where the National Assembly has gone cold on that, you know, and even stakeholders generally have not been talking about that. That should have been a major outcome of the 2022 reform of the electoral legal framework. If we have an electoral offenses commission, first of all, you have reduced the burden out of INEC. And that commission will be something like EFCC or ICPC. They will have their own investigators, they will have their own prosecutors, and they will be able to more competently and efficiently address this issue of impunity in the Commission of Electoral Offenses. I think it's something that we have left undone for a very long time. And I will plead that post-2023 elections, before the next general elections, we need to ensure that we have that. Because the impunity in Nigerian election, it's certainly much, much more than any other African country, if not any other country in the world. But if there is prosecution, and the prosecution of not just the small offenders, but even the big offenders, for example, when it comes to use of money or the use of thugs to kill or to mime or to disrupt polling stations or collation centers, then obviously we will begin to bring more sanity into the electoral process. I'm sorry I've taken so much time, but you raised such an important question.
Yeah, it's an important question that we needed to clear with. And just before I open it up, you alluded to the fact that you think that this change, redesign in the Naira would probably help to curb the use of money in this election cycle this time around.
Yes, when I said change of color has become the cliche, you know, but in particular, the associated regulations that go with it. This issue about ensuring, in fact, I think in general, If everything goes well with the change of color and the implementation of the regulations, politicians close to the election season are likely to have less money to play around with to buy votes. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay. Is that why you think, I mean, only yesterday we saw one of the presidential candidates complaining about this. Is there any connection, you think, between?
I think so. I mean, any presidential candidate who knows how money is used in the past and now takes this in context of the preparations for the 2023 elections would know that it will be very difficult now to have cash on election day of course, they have ways of undermining this, because let me mention this. Just today, I heard that one of the reasons why even if you go to banks, you can't get the new Naira and they are not putting the money in the ATMs is because, and this is the allegation, that bank managers are stockpiling that money and are conniving with some of the politicians who needed the cash, and in Nigeria, anything is possible. So it's possible that this is happening and that they are finding other ways of still getting the money in spite of the change and the regulations. But I think any serious politician will see the connection.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Prof. Let me open the floor up for other people. Jumoke, if you have a quick thing.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Jumoke.
I have a couple of questions, and this is more for we as the electorate. How do we better prepare to ensure that this is free, fair elections and that our votes count? INEC would do its part, but we as Nigerian citizens going to the polls, at the polls, just before the polls, and even after the votes come in, what are some of the tools that we need to prepare to support the integrity of this election?
Thank you so very much for that question. It's very, very important. Citizen action would probably be the most effective way of ensuring that votes count. And the citizen action is better if it is collectively organized. And of course, collective organization is usually under the platform of either community-based organizations or civil society organizations. So it's very, very important. As I have said, given the measures introduced by INEC since 2019 and the new Electoral Act, the atmosphere for the conduct of elections is bound to be much, much more transparent than it has been before. The challenge is how to ensure that politicians do not truncate this transparent atmosphere. So it is only citizens' action collectively that can ensure that politicians do not pollute the atmosphere in the conduct of election or interfere with the collation of results process or undermine the transmission of results. So how can citizens groups do this? First of all, and I'm very happy to hear that Yaga, I think with cooperation with Channels TV, has been doing a sustained voter education program. I think all credible civil society organizations that are engaged with the electoral process need to scale up this sensitization and voter education in the next few weeks before the election. So people who have registered and who have got their cards must come out to vote. And if they come out to vote, the regulations that INEC has issued and the guidelines permit citizens when they vote to remain to watch the counting of the results and to also monitor how these results are transmitted. For example, now, which is a remarkable improvement, once the results are counted in a polling unit. And all the party agents have signed the appropriate forms in the presence, of course, of civil society organizations and other accredited observers. And copies are given to the agents of political parties. The presiding officer is required to use the BVAS and to take a picture or a scan of the result sheet, and then to now transmit this to a national collation center. So citizens at the polling unit and the party agents have to ensure that a presiding officer actually has done this as is required. Also, a presiding officer is required to paste a copy of the result sheet. And pasting a copy is to allow everybody who has observed the process to be able to use their phones and take the photographs, you know, and so that if for any reason along the way results change, it's very, very easy to have the evidence and to be able to contest that. But if citizens are lackadaisical and they allow either the agents of the so-called major parties in areas where they control to do as they wish, then we will continue to have this challenge of either alteration of results or buying of election officials to alter the results. So there are a lot of things really citizen action can do, but voters need to be enlightened, need to be educated, and only civil society organizations or community-based organizations or through media activities can they be sufficiently enlightened and educated to be able to act as responsible citizens, either at the polling units or at the different levels of collation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
You've just very carefully articulated the steps. Does INEC have a publication on citizens' engagement during elections that can be shared? And then the second question I would have is, you talked about credible CSOs, and I think there's a lot of international monitoring organizations. Is there a list and contact that maybe citizens can participate in those kind of, since they already have established structures in place? So does INEC have a list of all those organizations?
Yes, INEC, to be honest, and that's why when I compared what we did before 2015 and what they have done since then, I said there are remarkable improvements. They have published a lot of guidelines, and in fact, virtually all of these things, the list of accredited observers is usually published in newspapers and is put on the INEC website. And many of these guidelines or regulations for the conduct and preparation for elections are also placed on the INEC website. And so they are easily accessible. I also know that something we started before 2015, they have also sustained it. They have a media center where people can call, and you can find the details on the website, where you can call and ask a specific question, and they will be able to provide answers to you. You know, so all these are measures they have taken to improve communication with stakeholders, to provide more information, to make information more accessible. You know, and interestingly, using technology, I don't know whether many of you know that even to find out which polling unit you will be voting, you can go through the website and put the details of your voter's card, and automatically you will get the information as to the location of your polling unit. So there is a lot of improvement in terms of preparing information and sharing information to all citizens, of course, including civil society organizations and community-based organizations. Yes.
Thank you. So your advice would be to Nigerians to go on INEC's website, get all this information, familiarize themselves with the guidelines at the polling units and what the process would be. That would be one clear message to the electorate.
Yes, but remember, we have different categories of electorate. Some electorate are unable to use technology, so cannot go to website or other things, or particularly people in the rural areas. That's why the major responsibility is for organized citizens groups. Civil society organizations need to get all this information and find ways and the means of ensuring that other citizens as voters and members of the electorate have this information, so that you can have an enlightened voter who turns out to vote on election day. Otherwise, even if you have your voter's card, even if you go to election, if you do not know how to cast your vote, you do not know what to do, you may end up wasting your vote. And that's why we have a lot of canceled votes. So it's very, very important for that sensitization. And unfortunately, many civil society organizations in Nigeria, here we have to come up clean and mention our inadequacies, rely on foreign funding by development partners to do some of these responsibilities. And unfortunately, the funding is not adequate, because voter education is one area where development partners do not put a lot of money, because they say there are no measurable outcomes. Funding nowadays by partners is predicated on whether you can measure the impact of the resources in terms of whether the outcomes are measurable. Now, the interesting thing again is that even our political parties, unfortunately, do not pay adequate attention to voter education. They are the ones who have candidates. They are the ones who want their candidates to be elected. Therefore, they have a major responsibility to enlighten voters, to get them to register, to get them to come out on election day to vote, but to also get them, when they come out to vote properly, so that they don't mess up their vote. But political parties in Nigeria don't spend much money or any money in voter education and sensitization. I can tell you, when I was in INEC before the 2015 election, I don't know what is happening now, when we told them the need for them to be actively involved in voter education, they were asking INEC to give them money to do this. And we are saying, how can INEC give you money to do this? You have the candidates, you are the ones who will form governments if your candidates win. And so it's in your own interest to get people to come out to vote and to vote properly. So how do you expect INEC to be the one to fund you to do this? So I think both for our political parties and civil society organizations, there is the need to really recognize what our fundamental responsibility is with regards to enlightening voters and getting them adequately prepared to engage with the electoral process in such a manner that the elections will have integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we have quite a few hands up, so I'm just going to ask one last question. You talked about, the technology gap and those that have access to technology and those in the rural area. Can you speak a little bit about, maybe while you were in office, or if you're aware of some of the strategy that INEC has right now to reach those in the rural areas that may not, that probably don't have access to technology, because they are also very important. And civil society, as you mentioned, have limited resources. So is this in INEC's scope to be able to reach the rural areas and make sure that they get the information or the voters' education that they need and the guidelines that they need.
All right, thank you very much. Actually, one of the responsibilities of INEC defined in the electoral legal framework is voter education. So it still has to do that, but in general, INEC also lacks the resources to do this. That's why it is important that while INEC does some, political parties also do some, and the civil society organizations and community-based organizations also do so that the more the merrier, the better. Now, from my experience in INEC, the best way to reach voters in the rural areas is to either encourage community-based organizations to do road shows, or to pay for a lot of not only jingles, but some voter education programs in radios. Particularly now, there is a lot of accessibility to airwaves because so many FM stations have been established, including community-based radios. So INEC does its bit in terms of doing voter education using the community-based radios and the other FM stations, and also the major established radio networks. In most cases, INEC tries to enter into some form of MOU and relationship with these media organizations, so that even if INEC has to pay, there is some little subsidy so that the little resources it has will be able to do more in terms of coverage. But the resources of INEC are very, very inadequate to cover the Nigerian electorate, given the size of our country and given in particular the number of people who need that kind of enlightenment. Because if you recall, in our country, still in 2023, about 60%, if not more, of our citizens are actually illiterate. They can hardly read or write, and therefore their medium of communication is limited, extensively limited. Now, I also know that in addition to what INEC budgets for voter education, it also solicits and quite often gets a lot of support from development partners for voter education and sensitization. I think what has been quite helpful is that many development partners, whether it is the UNDP through its governance and democracy programs, or the EU, or even the USAID, they do not provide resources commensurate to what is required in voter education because of the problem I mentioned of measurability. But they do still provide some support. So it is a combination of this support and what INEC budgets that they now use for voter education. And frankly, if civil society organizations are able to do their bit and political parties are able to do their bit, there will be much more extensive coverage, particularly where it is needed most in our rural areas and amongst those illiterate citizens.
Thank you very much, sir. And I'll hand over back to Pastor Sonny because we have a few hands up, but it appears that there's an initiative in the works here for us to analyze the plus and deltas of the current strategy in preparation for 2027. So we'll probably be engaging you on that process going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pastor Sonny.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a few questions. We'll take 3 or 4 at a time, and then you can respond to them. So just kindly note them. I will take Afolabi Ajidaun, Alex Arije, Samuel Dada, and Patience Bentu. So in that order, Jumoke, unmute them. Afolabi, Ajidawu. Please, let's manage time, go straight to the point so that we can put in a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here. Please, my first question is...
Former chairman, please.
Former chairman.
Identity I
Apologies.
don't have.
Former chairman.
All right.
My first question is, so long as Mr. President continues to be the one that appoints the INEC chairman or INEC senior members, do you think we can truly get an independent and independent? Can they truly be independent when they are not be partial to the ruling party? I know maybe you were not, because you obviously gave the presidency to the non-incumbent in 2015. But the sway and the pressure on the INEC chairman or senior members of INEC being appointed by the president, do you think it has any sway on them? And my second question is, please, why is it always so difficult to get, first of all, necessarily to register, but to get your voters' cards with INEC? Can't we find a simpler and easier way to be able to get voters' cards once we've registered? Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Alex Ariji, thank you very much, Samuel Dada. Those are very, very, very beautiful questions. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for coming. My question is it possible for any organization to hack INEC to change the result of any the final result of the election?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful question. Samuel Dada.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. It's very pleasant listening to you, sir. My question is it possible for INEC to dabble into internal politics of any party? I have an example of this. In 2019, there was a party, or the party still existing. Some group of people, they went to INEC and said they are now the new executive of the party, and the party accepted, and the INEC accepted their names. And then I was like, why does it happen in any world that INEC decide who becomes the chairman of a party? This should be their internal political borara. It shouldn't be.
Sorry, when did this happen? When did you say this happened?
2019. You were no more there, sir. I just want to know from you because I know you're a sincere man, sir. It happens to AAC. I think it was June last year. Omoyele Sowore got back his party. And again, the second question is, why is it true that before you can register a party, the executive body of that party must come from the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria? Like, I'm a Yoruba man, and I call other 2 Yoruba person to form a party. And we paid INEC, and INEC now said, no, you can't create a party. Your bodies, every executive must be from the different political region in the country. I want to know if that is true, because I was told that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I answer this?
Okay, there's just one more, sir. Chairman, you want to take that? Patience.
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Which is the next one? Who is asking the question?
Patience.
So you've taken 3 questions already. Do you want to take the 4th one?
Yeah, no problem. I can take all of them.
Okay, take Patience, just Patience, the last one, and then he can answer all.
All right.
Very much. Prof, my question is born out of a little bit of confusion as to a particular practice of some of our politicians. And it's around this habit of presenting at Chatham House in London, which is healthy for good governance. But I note that the visits are fast becoming popular just before elections, especially with candidates from the larger political parties, the more popular political parties in Nigeria. So I'm interested in knowing, you know, what the impact of these visits actually have on the electoral process itself. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you all. Prof, you can go ahead. I hope you remember all the questions.
Yes, I have taken notes, so let
Okay.
me rely on my notes. They may not be comprehensive, but if I'm unable to answer a question appropriately, I will be glad to have clarification so I can answer it.
Okay.
So I want to start with patience. To my mind, in a country that has a history of very bad elections and electoral outcomes, and where globally we are lowly rated, and where there seems to be a global interest in terms of the preparations for the elections. Frankly, I do not see anything wrong on if a think tank anywhere in the world invites a political party or a candidate or even the Electoral Commission to come and make a presentation. I don't see anything wrong in accepting the invitation, provided that it is not at the expense of other invitations domestically. You know, it's good to share information globally. It's good to build confidence in what we are preparing to do. And it's also good for our candidates because these think tanks, when people go to make presentations, they are also representatives of governments there, even if it is not announced, who are just listening and trying to say, okay, if this guy wins and comes into power, how can our country relate with the kind of agenda that he or she articulates? You know, so to be honest, I don't see anything wrong with being invited and accepting. But I think where the challenge comes in is what we have seen as a trend in Nigeria. Candidates who are invited to address gatherings in Nigeria find one reason or the other to not participate, but are very, very quick to accept invitations from abroad. Now, for me, that is a problem, you know, because you have to put your priorities right. Addressing the Nigerian citizens, the Nigerian electorate, is of higher priority than going abroad to address think tanks. You know, so I think if our politicians can have their priorities carefully addressed, there really shouldn't be any problem of their going anywhere to speak about their agenda if they get elected for Nigeria. The international community is interested in knowing this agenda, just like all citizens in Nigeria are interested. So the primary thing is we have to put our priorities right. As for me, I can tell you, I had an invitation to Chatham House before we did the 2015 general elections, and I accepted it, you know, because I know we've done enormous preparations to make 2015 credible. And I know that many countries were still skeptical about whether we can pull it through. Because if you recall, there were many doomsday predictors who are predicting that Nigeria will no longer be there after 2015 election. So I accepted some of those invitations. I was in Chatham House. I was at CSIS in Washington, D.C. I was also at the Institute of Peace, telling people that this is how adequately we have prepared, and giving them the opportunity to ask questions and for us to explain in order to douse tension and skepticism internationally, and also to generate sufficient support for us to also be able to do our job. So that's my question, Patience. Ordinarily, there should be no problem for candidates or INEC or even civil society organizations responding to invitations to provide clarity to our electoral process. The only thing is the prioritization. We have to know that we need to respond to more invitations domestically than others that come externally. All right, Samuel, you asked the question that is it possible to double into the internal politics of any political party? And the simple and the straightforward answer is that legally, INEC is supposed to be impartial and non-partisan in the way in which it relates with political parties, with candidates, and all participants in the electoral process. And it's even very clear the extent of its involvement in the affairs of political parties is defined by law. For example, INEC is mandated to monitor conventions and assemblies, general meetings of every political party, and to produce a report. And they are also required to audit the finances of all political parties, and they are also required to publish the result of this auditing. But in terms of interfering in the selection of leaders or in the election of leaders, INEC has no responsibility. If that happens, and I will be surprised if that is what happened in the case that you said, if that happened, then obviously it's an aberration, it's an illegality. But my suspicion, because that is another thing that INEC does, when a party elects its officials, which INEC monitored, and all the list of all recognized executives of a political party, by the way, are also on INEC's website. So if another party comes to INEC and says these are our executives, and they compare it with the record that they have, the record of what they monitored, then obviously they will not recognize that. They will only recognize those that were elected at the convention that they monitored, because they are empowered by law to monitor those meetings. So I would like to know more about what exactly happened, because I will be really, really surprised that INEC jettisoned the legitimately elected officials of a political party and imposed other candidates. Now, is it true that before registering a political party, there has to be national representation in the executives? Yes, it is true. This is either a constitutional requirement about political parties. If you have the 1999 Constitution as amended, you can cross-check, or in the Electoral Act. But definitely, there is a legal requirement that for a political party to be registered, a number of things have to be met, a number of conditions have to be met. And one of the conditions is that the appointed executive must reflect national character. And it is not just about geopolitical zone, it's actually about states. So if not all the states, but substantial majority of the states have to be represented on the executive. That's why, unfortunately, the size of the executive committees of many political parties is so large and unwieldy. But that is because there is a legal requirement for that. And the reason is, since 1979, when the 1979 Constitution came into effect, Nigeria wanted to ensure that no political parties are created based on religion or ethnicity or regionalism.
Recording in progress.
So that's one of the conditions. So it's linked, yes, it's true. To answer your question, it is true that there is a legal requirement for that. Okay, Alex, is it possible to hack into INEC software database, into INEC database?
Teach them to pray.
As you know, and as many of us on this platform know, you can't say impossible when you are dealing with technology in this modern age. There are so many hackers that can hack into virtually everything, and that is why many governments and organizations actually take the trouble to employ the hackers so that they can work for them rather than work against them. So I don't think even INEC can tell you with absolute certainty that their database cannot be hacked. But they have given a lot, they have issued a lot of statements that they have put in place adequate server security to ensure that the system is robust enough to not be disrupted during the 2023 elections. And of course, I suppose political parties can engage INEC to know the extent to which this cybersecurity for the databases is truly secure. And I'm sure INEC will be able, without compromising that security, to enlighten political parties about what they have done. I know that in 2015, we did that, and we also reassured the political parties about what we did, even though at that time we were not doing electronic transmission, because electronic transmission is what the transmission process can be hacked into and disrupted, not necessarily to alter what goes into the database. Those who are computer savvy will probably know all these things I am saying. So in Kenya, they have had nasty experiences about hackers interfering with the transmission of results. I can tell you also that before the 2015 general elections, we were actually prepared in INEC to do electronic transmission of results. We had developed capacity in-house, and we looked for adequate cyber security. Unfortunately, we jettisoned that because of what happened in Kenya. Because we said Nigerians now, because the Kenyan experience was in the public domain and many people have had it. So those who are anti-electronic transmission of results would use it to pollute the Nigerian electoral atmosphere leading to 2015 elections. So that's why we did not do it. But I believe is the way to go. And I'm very happy that INEC now got the legal framework amended to permit them to do this. Because frankly, incremental use of technology can also incrementally increase the transparency and the integrity of our elections. So Alex, I will tell you that I cannot say with certainty that the INEC server cannot be hacked into, but I can tell you that INEC has made public statements with reassurances that they have taken adequate measures to ensure that this does not happen. Let me tell you also, sorry, going down memory lane. In 2015, while they did not attack our databases because we were not really truly online, they disrupted our website on election day for at least about 45 minutes. You know, because we were providing a lot of information on the website at our result collation center. So while the election was going on, the website just went off, and we established that it was hacked into and disrupted. But luckily, we quickly brought it back after about 45 or 50 minutes, certainly less than 1 hour. You know, so hackers are there. Some of them paid by the contestants in the elections to do that. Some of them who are so anarchic that they just prove that they have the ingenuity to do this, or because they just want to create confusion and cause crisis. So that's why electoral commissions have to be up and doing and ensure that they have deployed the most robust software that can serve against, can work against hackers. No absolute guarantees, but a lot can be done and a lot can be gained by doing that. Now, Afolabi.
Okay, Prof. If you take the questions quickly, because we have a few more, so that.
Okay. To be honest, a situation in which the president appoints the chairman and members of the Electoral Commission is always suspected, and it's better to avoid it. Because particularly in a country like Nigeria, people have this saying, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So even if in reality, the appointer or the person who appointed these people does not actually interfere in their work, the perception is still there. And the perception is better avoided. So the Ways Electoral Reform Committee recommended a measure that can insulate the appointment of chairman and the electoral commissioners. Unfortunately, that recommendation was not accepted. So the only improvement was that when I was appointed, President Goodluck Jonathan did not just announce my name. He took my name to the Council of State, which was the first time that was done. And the Council of State unanimously endorsed my nomination before they now sent me my name to the Senate for confirmation. You know, so what he did ensured that even though people will say he was the one who nominated me, at least my appointment was endorsed by all members of the National Council of State, you know, and then confirmed by the Senate. But our process can be better. You know, I will recommend that we learn from other African countries and totally remove the president from playing any role in the appointment of chair and commissioners of the Electoral Commission. All right. Now, and again, let me say that it is not impossible. It is not impossible that a president can appoint the chair or even members and still be unable to control them. You know, because if people go there and believe that even though the president has nominated me, I'm here to do national service and I will work in accordance with the dictates of my conscience, you know, the law protects anybody who can do that to be able to do their job without being susceptible to interference. But the other thing is that you also need a good president who can appoint and who can refuse to interfere. And to be honest, I have said this privately, I can say it publicly, that President Jonathan meant well for our country. He never interfered in my work as the chairman of INEC or directed the commission to do anything that we did not have the freedom to reject if we felt that it was not proper to do so. You know, so I believed that we did our job. He made our job easier by actually trying to ensure that he respected the legal framework under which we were appointed. All right, thank you very much. I think I will stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Time is fast gone. I think we can only take this next four. Shegun Odushote, Chinyere Nwa Naka, Vigor Youth Network, Abiola Supo. So we'll start with Segun.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for very incisive and helpful details. I was wondering, you mentioned people, for example, in your rural areas. I was wondering, for those who cannot read, is there a way that they're helped to vote, and can that be abused? Okay. So is there a way to be sure that they're casting their votes for the right candidate? And then also, INEC, the INEC register, is it something that can be used for demographic planning in the future? Basically, is there a plan to use it? And in terms of like biometrics, why wasn't it possible for INEC to have just used BVN and NIN biometrics to have reduced the scale of work they had to do?
Okay, thank you.
And just a quick one, which is quite important. Finally, are we going to be able to have bolder steps? I commend what has been done in terms of like the electoral bill right now, but are we going to make more giant steps, like being able to vote from our phones, and also those of us in the diaspora being able to vote in the next elections?
All right, thank you very much, Segun. We'll take Chinyere. Prof, just to remind you, they said there was a question you didn't answer about difficulty in producing and collecting voter cards. That we collect our ATM cards on the Jiffy. Why does INEC take so long? But you will take that in. Chinyere, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, sorry, it's Chine
Okay,
Wanaka, co-founder Africa Policy.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay,
Good evening,
may
Prof.
May I get the name? What is the name again? Chinenye. Okay, yes.
Chinenye, yeah, Chinenye
Okay.
Wanaka.
Sorry, I've got it now. Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir. So, my question is about 3.5 million students actually registered for their PVCs, and a lot of them were on strike then because of ASU strike, but now they're in school. What can be done to ensure that these young people are not disenfranchised from this upcoming elections? From a private sector point of view, those of us that are in the civil society and private sector space, beyond advocacy, what else can we do to ensure that these students are not disenfranchised? And then secondly, the issue of the PVCs, why are people not able to use any government issued ID card, be it a passport or, driver's license, because it's the form of identification that we're looking for, because it also seems like having people register and collect PVCs is a way of also limiting the number of people that can actually participate in this election process.
Okay, thank you, Chine. Vigor Youth Network, please state your proper name and ask your question.
Please, I think you have the question of PVC. Like back now, I can open an account in Lagos when I get to Port Harcourt or any part of Nigeria.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing this. It's not very audible.
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can now hear you. Speak louder.
I said, say for instance, like bank, I can open an account here in Lagos. When I get to Port Harcourt, I can withdraw money or make any transaction. Is it not possible for INEC to do the same thing? During election, anywhere you are, you can easily vote, any part of the country, even outside the country. You can vote from outside. So is it not possible? Because right now we are in digital generation.
Okay.
That is my question.
Thank you. Abiola. Is Abiola still there?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
My name is Abiola Sapo. Well, mine is a bit of a digression from the electoral process. I just want to take advantage of Prof. being a professor of political science and having been so deeply involved in the democratic process of this country. He's been so deep in it that I want to ask this question. Which system does he think suits us better? parliamentary system or presidential?
Or a combination of diarchy. Okay, Prof, you'll take these last questions and then Pastor Ituah will come in with a final question.
All right, thank you so very much. I can answer Abiola very quickly. Personally, I prefer the presidential system and I prefer it. And I believe the major problem of the presidential system right now is because the implementers, those who get elected, have failed to protect the separation of powers and have also made it so expensive. I believe that if we can reduce the expensive nature of the current presidential system, introduce better checks and balances, we can still have the presidential system work better for us as a country of diverse people than a parliamentary system. That's my view as a political scientist who actually teaches comparative political systems and who has studied not only different federal systems, but different presidential systems and different types of parliamentary systems. So I will stop here because, as you said, Abiola, this is a digression. Now,
yes, VYN,
thank you, VYN. Why can't people vote anywhere? Now, in this age and time, although this is a possibility, there are very few countries where you can do this. In fact, the internet voting, I think there's only 1 or 2 countries in the world where you can vote from your bedroom through what they call internet voting, you know. But electronic voting, you have to go out to a polling unit and press on the machine. And of course, if you are using non-electronic voting, which is manual, like the way we use in Nigeria, it's very difficult to register in one place and to vote in another. Usually, universally, you vote where you are resident. And therefore, electoral commissions require people to register where they are resident, as closer to your polling unit as is possible. In Nigeria, it's even in the law. You can only, you are to register close to your polling unit and you can only vote there. So maybe let's take things a step at a time, you know, because we want to improve the integrity of the process, make it more transparent. We will get to a time then when we can use the technology and there will be sufficient trust, you know, because if I take it along with why can't people use any form of identification? The same problem, there is no trust. And people can fake all sorts of identification cards. And at the time began this reform of the electoral process in 2011, there was no BVN, there was no, what is the other one you mentioned? They were all not there. We were the first to start having a serious voter's card that is electronically driven. You know, so first things first, if we achieve a higher level of not only transparency, but also trust, you know, then we will move into the possibility of you just bring any ID to any polling unit and register, you know. But the INEC database, as of now, is the most comprehensive database. And we had wanted it to be the foundation of the national identity card as far back as 2012, after we cleaned it up, you know. But pettiness and bureaucratic infighting, everybody wants to control his stuff, you know. Those who are in charge of national identity management card and the national registration do not want to use any other database. They want to create their own and so on. So that's why we have these multiple databases. Immigration is now doing their own. But towards the future, we need one single integrated national database so that police can use it for crime. INEC can go to it and pick anybody 18 and above to be part of the register and so on and so forth. The same problem with students. You see, because the law requires that you register, you will vote where you have registered, it means that you have to collect your voter's card you will vote where you are resident. So most students voted in school because they thought by the time elections are conducted, they will be in school. Now, their cards are produced, they will be produced in school if that's where they registered. So if they are not in school during election, then there is no way they can vote, unfortunately. But if somebody registered in school and wanted to vote in his village, his or her village, there is a procedure for change of, what do you call it, polling units. And anybody who has done that obviously could change his place of voting. But if you do not do it, you can't just pick your voter's card from the village and come to school to vote, or vice versa. Because legally, the law is so stringent, you know, that it prohibits this kind of flexibility. So it's unfortunate if it is true that about 3.5 million students are going to have a problem because of this, but I don't see how they can have a problem. Yes, there was a long strike, but if they registered in school, they are now back in school, so they can pick up their voters' cards. So I really don't understand what the problem is.
No, the question was they registered at home, but they are now in school. So how can they come back? But it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing, really.
Yeah.
The law clearly says you have to vote where you register. All right, CSOs, what can they do beyond advocacy? But it's related to this issue. So I don't see what else really they can do. You can plead with INEC, but INEC, to respond to that plea, INEC will break the law. You know, so really, unfortunately, these are things that maybe in the future we can all address. That's why I keep talking about incremental positive changes. We are trying to revive trust and transparency in the system, so that the more we build trust in the system, the more we can trust INEC, the more it can use technology in the process, then perhaps the more we can now relax and say that people can vote anywhere they are, people can use any form of identification, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we, Pastor
Okay.
Sonny, before
Okay, so
you...
back to the question of the difficulty in collecting voters' cards. You know, it's the same thing. First of all, the ATM cards you get, there are many banks and they are dealing with a very small number of customers compared to INEC that is dealing with about 99.3 million registered voters. So obviously the space and the efficiency they do this will be different in terms of the efficiency they produce and deliver the cards will be different. Secondly, each bank can deploy voting ATM machines, and therefore, since you are registered to that bank, you can go to any ATM machine that uses that is of that bank, or the others using the inter-switch system to get your money. That's totally different from elections, you know, because elections, you have to go to a polling unit, you know, and you can't just go to a polling unit where you have not registered, because your card will not show in that polling unit. So really there are technical, procedural, and legal challenges, which for now will make it impossible. Maybe in the future, we may be able to deploy adapt and deploy technologies that will be able to make this easier and also cost efficient. Because to be able to do that, for example, like ATM, INEC should be able to deploy transaction machines in each polling unit, so that when you come with your voter's card, you can just insert it and then you'll be able to be accredited so you can vote. And just imagine the humongous resources, the technology that will be required, the electricity in terms of sustainable electricity or even internet coverage. So I think we should tread softly. You know, we will continue to increase technology so that we can increase the integrity of elections, so that we can reduce suspicions and fears, and so that with time we can become more flexible in the way in which we conduct our elections. Thank you.
Okay. We have a couple of questions from YouTube, sir. If you could just take those. Unfortunately, we had a glitch with Zoom today, and so it wasn't able to let a few people in. If I could, so the first question from the YouTube participants, could there be a permanent structure for an accessibility or for accessibility for diasporans to be able to vote online, sir? And then the second question, issues and challenges highlighted are protracted in our climate. In my opinion, they seem symptomatic of poor governance structure of the country. I'm not sure what the question is, but I'll keep reading. Of the country, which is deeply rooted in the foundation. Given that background, do you believe the current democratic experience is working, or do you think we should research more in the area of our history, culture, and our collective national aspiration to define what will work for us? Excellent question. So the two questions from from YouTube.
Thank you very much. Let me say that I am a strong proponent of diaspora voting. And the reason why we didn't have diaspora voting, at least from 2015, is because our politicians are afraid of diaspora voting. Some think that their opponents will get more votes if we do diaspora voting. And therefore, they refuse to provide the legal framework that will ensure that diaspora voting is done. Diaspora voting can be done even using manual voting, and many other countries are using it. Even here in Africa, Kenya, for the last 2 cycles of their elections, are doing diaspora voting, but they have limited the scale. They first started with neighboring countries. So all Kenyans that are in neighboring countries were able to participate. And then by the last election, they now expanded the number of countries from where you can vote. Very few countries are able to do diaspora voting from every country in the world, you know. But in our own country, this issue of suspicion and the fears has been really a stumbling block. Since 2010, when I came into INEC, we kept reassuring people in diaspora that INEC has the capacity to organize diaspora voting, provided there will be the legal framework. But as I speak with you, even now, the law does not allow diaspora voting. So INEC cannot even move in the direction of planning to organize it. So if the legal encumbrance is removed, I'm sure INEC will address the issue of diaspora voting. It's necessary, it's important. Everybody knows this. People in diaspora are enlightened voters also, and they can contribute more positively. And they also are contributing a lot to the economy. So they therefore have a stake in terms of who governs Nigeria as a country. You know, so the argument for diaspora voting is solid, is unimpeachable. But there has to be a legal framework that will enable INEC to organize diaspora voting. Now, yes, I will agree with the perspective that a lot of the challenges we face in election and in many other areas of governance are symptomatic of our cultural values and beliefs. And I will say not all our cultural values and beliefs, but the negative aspects of our cultural values and beliefs, which means that they now become obstacles to deepening our experiment with democratization and democratic development. So personally, first of all, I'm not Afrocentric. I am not arguing that we should abandon everything from Europe and develop our own democratic system that is African, because I believe that certain things are universal and certain things are also adaptable. So we have to look for solutions that other people are using that have universal characteristics, but we should adapt it to our own local context. And I think democratic governance is one of those issues that has universal characteristics that are adaptable to our own local systems, and that if only we can get good operators in charge, we can continue to deepen it and to expand it, and we shouldn't be wasting time. We can't reinvent the wheel. We can't say throw away this thing and then develop an African or a Nigerian democratic system. I don't think that will be helpful. I don't support that. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. We've spent 2 hours and we've taken a lot of your time. I'll call on Pastor Ituah if he's around so that he can take the final, he can do the honors of closing. Okay, Pastor Ituah will come. But Prof, we are really grateful for your time. You spent 2 hours with us. We are richly, we have learned quite a lot from what you have said. And I hope that everybody will go out there and participate in this circular round. And I pray that Nigeria gets it right this time. I also pray that INEC get their logistics right. And that's one thing I forgot to ask you. Ballot materials arriving late in the afternoon, in spite of all the preparation, we have been doing it over the years, we still keep having these issues. So that's something that I hope that INEC will get right at this time. So sort of any final words before we close, anything you just want to add?
Well, thank you so very much. And first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this interactive session. I myself have learned a lot, and I want to commend you, and particularly Pastor Ighodalo for initiating this and sustaining it. And it's a commendable initiative that should really be sustained. So thank you so much for this opportunity. The only thing I want to say, and as a concluding thought, is that we need more Nigerians to be optimistic about the future of our country. And I, for one, I am what I call an incurable optimist about the future of Nigeria. With that kind of mind frame, I engage in virtually everything I do with the mindset of how can we make it better? You know, because if we all think about, yes, there are challenges, and these challenges may be difficult, but they are not insurmountable, then we can engage with a mind frame of how can we make it better? How can we learn from our experiences? How can we learn from other comparative experiences? And then how can we put all this together and work towards making things better? If we have more Nigerians with that kind of mindset, believe me, we will be able to change the terrible nature of our current political dispensation, and we will be able then to create a basis in which we can incrementally add value so that from one election cycle to another election cycle, we will be deepening our democracy, improving the governance systems, structures, and the institutions, and therefore creating the framework for the development of our country for future generations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. It's been a wonderful and exciting and most educative session. I wish we could go on and on and on and on, but we have to call it a day. I want to thank everybody that has been on the platform. I want to thank everybody for the lively interactions. Those whose questions we couldn't take, we do apologize. If you send them by email to our website, we'll be able to compile them and send them back to Prof for his engagements. Prof, I'll try and see you maybe when I'm in Abuja sometime, and then we can have deeper dive conversations between yourself and myself, and then we'll take it from there. Warm regards from Professor Utomi and the rest of the team. God bless you all. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend and good night. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I look forward to meeting you and to discuss, and all the best to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. So I think there's the link to this recording is in the chat. Please go ahead and share it. And apologies for the for the Zoom glitch today. We're not sure what happened, but we'll resolve that before the end of the day and to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So thank you for your participation. Share the YouTube link, like, and subscribe.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you, everybody.
Have a good evening.